Hi everyone. This afternoon we will be looking at behaviorism and cognitive theory for the Pacific context. For my introduction, I'd like to say that the Pacific ecology of education mainly comprises of two things: the formal education that's been introduced by missionary efforts, and the informal education that is being practiced from our ancestors in the past. Or we can say it is a traditional way of teaching and learning. Now, to look at the content of the presentation, I'd like to talk about the Western influence, mainly from the top down. Most of the time, our Pacific educational system in the Pacific is being mainly influenced by international organization, regional organization, and government. Those organizations and government are the main aid donors who wanted to raise the standard of education in the Pacific. And in the process, they are giving out huge money in order to grow education in the Pacific. And while they are donating huge money to the Pacific education, they wanted the Pacific countries to adopt their Western policies, such as the one that has been adopted in Vanuatu, which is the National Policy of Childhood Education and Inclusive Education in 2001, where they wanted to include disability who live in rural areas and remote areas into the education. Within these policies, there are theories that guides learning, and the two major ones is behaviorist theory and cognitive theory. Behaviorist theory comprises of two aspects, which is the classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Classical conditioning looks at how a learner is being conditioned to respond to certain types of learning, and operant conditioning is to look at the associate things or behavior that being associated with rewards, such as that could be in two things, which is reinforcement and punishment. When we reinforce a behavior, it is likely that the behavior will happen again in the future. When we punish unwanted or undesired behavior, it is likely that it will decrease and you increase the good behavior. In cognitive theory, we look at schema, assimilation, and accommodation. Schema is the building blocks of learning, according to psychologists, cognitive psychology. Assimilation is when we accumulate a new knowledge upon the one that we already have in our schema, and then we adapt it. So, and accommodation is when we accumulate new knowledge, completely new knowledge into our schema to expound our schema in terms of knowledge side. And it also talks about development stages, sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operation. Those different stages talks about the cognitive development of a child, of how he was thinking, and they believe the child thinks completely different from what we as adults do. And it talks about how we accumulate knowledge, basic of language in sensory motor, and we develop it sophisticatedly pre-operational, and then we become abstract, and we keep began to solve problems at the end when we become more mature. While leaning onto the Western philosophy of education, we tend to question ourselves: what about us, the Pacific Islanders? Is our informal or traditional method of teaching and learning are not relevant, are relevant or not correlated? There are many uh, great thinking philosophers in the Pacific who keep on thinking and came up with the Rethinking Pacific Education Initiative for Pacific people, by Pacific people. And they wanted to develop curriculums that are relevant to the Pacific context so that we could learn what that is actually in the Pacific. In other words, we are developing a sustainable education to build skills within the Pacific people, because at the end of the day, we do not go and live in Europe or America, but we live in our society, which is more locally than the European and American societies. So we need to educate people, develop curriculums that suit our society to build skills within our people to develop our own countries. And another example is, the first example is the establishment of country studies, such as Fiji. We have Fiji Institute of Indigenous Study and Tonga Native Study that has been established. And so far, 7 countries have adopted curriculum system. They develop curriculum system that are relevant with the context of our society. Another thing that I want to give as an example is the incorporation of vernacular in early childhood teaching, according to 2012 policy for language policy in Vanuatu. Class 1 and class 2 are teachers are emphasized to teach in their vernacular, since Vanuatu is a multilingual society. So class 1 and class 2 are emphasized to teach and learn, for children to learn in their vernacular. And slowly in class 3, they are incorporating English for the beginners to start learning in English. So that is a classic example of how we as Pacific integrate or incorporate our traditional culture or method of teaching and learning into the modern education or formal education in order to develop uh, our children with knowledge that are relevant to our society. In concluding, I'd like to say that Westernization, uh, the flow or the wave of Western education is much uh, stronger, and the more we became globalized, we are being influenced uh, from top down, from Western society into our Pacific society. So now non-agents such as non-government organization and even governments. But education should reflect our society and not alienate the people in the Pacific. Because our culture is rich, we are rich with knowledge, and we should develop this body of knowledge that we have in our education system to contextualize learning that are relevant and appropriate for our children to learn for uh, in order to live a good life that reflects our society and continue to develop our countries where we are from. Thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.